Welcome to Rocky Mountain Alliance Church in Golden, BC.
Some habits are hard to quit, you know. I still shampoo my hair. That bottle of shampoo lasts a long time, but I still use it. Some habits are hard to quit. It brings back good memories, I suppose. We were caring for our grandchildren this past week, and while our son was having surgery, and that went well. Grateful to God for that. And our granddaughter was looking at our wedding picture, talking to Audrey, and she asked, "Why didn't Grandpa want to keep his hair?" That's a good question. Why didn't he want to keep his hair? If you look over my shoulder, you probably can't see it too well, but that's actually our wedding picture behind me that she was looking at. For last Sunday was our 40th anniversary. I want to share a bit of my story leading up to that wedding day, and then you'll get to hear from Audrey this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, whenever you're listening to watching this video. If you look at our wedding picture, you'd realize that the groom is not nearly as recognizable as the bride. And it's not just the hair on the groom, and it's not just the glasses. But there are two wonders that never cease to amaze me. Three that cause me to be astounded and make me humbly grateful. That God has brought me into His family and called me His son. That He has ordained me to serve as His pastor. And that He has given Audrey to me as my wife. These three callings: to be a child of God, to serve my God as a pastor of His church, and to be a husband to Audrey. These three callings are completely intertwined in my life and experience. I want to share with you continuing stories from my own experience, my faith journey with you along these lines today. And I've asked Audrey to share a bit of her side of the story as well. You'll just have to wait a few moments for her to come on. Back when I was first interviewed about coming to Golden, I believe I said something like this: if you decide to call me as your pastor, it will be because you think I have something to offer and can serve acceptably. If you decide to keep me as your pastor, it will be because you don't want to lose Audrey. And if you come to know Audrey, you'll know the truth of that statement. First, a bit of my story and God working in my life, leading me towards a calling as a pastor, and then we'll hear from Audrey. That 18th year of my life that I shared about last week was a year of redirection from God. A New Year's Eve service at University Drive Alliance Church became a key focal point of redirecting. Following a full church service, the college and career group got together and shared in a time of testimony, and we were invited to share hopes and dreams we had for the coming year. Sort of the typical thing you generically ask about. I sat near the back, as I recall, of maybe 30 or 40 people, and wondered what that next year would bring for me as I'd moved to Saskatoon and working in Sears Automotive and so significantly involved in the church. Almost out of the blue, a realization struck me that if I wanted to do something, I could do it. Two things came right to mind. One was I wanted to go to Bible college. I had never thought that was a serious possibility, because what can you do with a Bible college degree? You can't make any money. My dad had kind of drilled that into me, that you go to university, become a teacher, make a lot of money, get a lot of holidays, and I thought that was the only choice I really had. Or drive a truck, which he said he didn't want us to do. But that New Year's Eve service, I realized I really wanted to go to Bible college. And I wanted to go to Haiti with Teen Missions. I didn't realize that I could even express such a dream or have such a hope. And I said it right out loud in that college and career event. Remember that junior teen boys Sunday school class I had been rooked into teaching? That experience revealed to me how little I knew of the Bible, and how little I knew how to teach what I did know of the Bible. And that I really wanted to learn. I wanted to become a better teacher, and I wanted to know the Bible better. So in a very real sense, it was junior teen boys that drove me to Bible college. And where did that desire to go to Haiti on a teen missions trip come from? Well, the Alliance Church took missions very seriously. They were front and center of what they existed for. And some others in the college and career group had heard and talked about teen missions and expressed a desire to go. And Haiti was a place that captured my interest. There was a building project there to complete an orphanage for some 50 orphan children. I wanted to help the poor. I just wanted to go. I didn't want to become involved in some evangelistic thing because I had no idea about evangelism or bike trips through Europe or Ireland or anything like that. I wanted to do something hands-on. I wanted to leave something concrete behind, and we literally did. It was a concrete and syndicate block building we left behind. And I wanted to do that. And in that moment, in that college and career meeting, I voiced those dreams with the acknowledgement that unless God provided, there was no way I would see those dreams come to fruition. See, I had no money saved to go on a missions trip. That was 1975. People didn't travel the world so freely in those days as they do now, or as they did until the recent restrictions kicked in. I was working. I was sending home any extra money I had to my parents because they were poor. They needed help, and that was our deal. And so I had no savings of my own. In short, if God didn't provide, those dreams wouldn't come to reality. So I gave voice at that New Year's Eve sharing time for the coming year, and acknowledged that unless God supplied, I wouldn't see them happen. He supplied. I went. First to Haiti on teen missions for 2 months. People actually gave money to support me for that summer missions trip. I was astounded. Then after Haiti and a 53-hour bus ride home from Florida to Saskatoon, I had 1 day turnaround, borrowed $500 from my parents. I guess it paid to have been sending them money earlier in the year, so they lent me $500, and I turned around, went back to Regina, and for the very first time went through the doors of Canadian Bible College. I'd never even been there before. I decided to go there because I knew some of the students there, and they impressed me. And how else do you decide on a good college to go to, but you look at the products and the people it's attracting. So $500 was what it took to get started. And then from then on, I had to keep paying the bills to stay current, getting part-time job and summer jobs and whatever it took. CBC was understanding and allowed a person to get started and to owe them and pay it off as they went. And the deal with God was, if He kept opening doors, I would continue to go through them. And if there was no door to open, I wouldn't force too hard, and I could always go back and drive a truck, I was sure. But God supplied. While I was in Haiti, I spent the summer reading the prophet Isaiah during our morning personal devotions times when we were enforced having private times and personal times. And one passage from Isaiah became key to me that I felt God impress on me, and through it impressed a couple things on me. Listen, it's from Isaiah 42. It's a song of the suffering servant of the Lord, the coming Messiah, who we know now is Jesus, who would have to suffer to see God's purposes accomplished. And this is about His calling. Thus says God the Lord, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread out the earth and its offspring, who gives breath to the people on it, and spirit to those who walk in it. I am the Lord. I have called you in righteousness. I will also hold you by the hand and watch over you. And I will appoint you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the nations, to open blind eyes, to bring out prisoners from the dungeon, and those who dwell in darkness from the prison. I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not give my glory to another. nor my praise to graven images. Behold, the former things have come to pass. Now I declare new things. Before they spring forth, I proclaim them to you. Now I realized that this prophecy about the Messiah, about Jesus, was something on a far greater scale than God was talking to me about. Nevertheless, the mission that Jesus had in this world is a mission that he shared with his followers, and I understood that. And God used this to affirm that he had called me also in righteousness, and that he would hold me by the hand and watch over me. And that in some small way, he wanted me to contribute to the mission of bringing light to a lost world. I was not so naive as to think that God was talking about me directly through this entire prophecy. At the same time, I knew that God called all his children to share in his mission to the lost people in our world. In some secondary way, God used this to prompt me to pursue his service in serving the church. See, I'd gone to Haiti with two goals in mind. One was to explore the possibility of a missionary call. The Alliance Church had kept missions front and center, as I said, and I wanted to know if this was something God had in view for my own life, and whatever a missionary call would look like. Why not in Haiti, if there was ever a place to find out if God had that in mind? And the second goal I had for that summer was to see whether he had gifted me for leadership in his church in any way. From last week's message, if you watched that video message, you realize I was very involved in the church in my 18th year. And I had a suspicion that perhaps the college and career pastor had simply taken a liking to me and put me in places of responsibility that I didn't really fit and didn't really belong. So my second goal in going to Haiti on teen missions was to intentionally hold back, not put myself forward, and see if God had a role of leadership for me. I was one of 28 teens on that particular team, 4 adult leaders, and it wasn't long before myself and maybe a couple others became unofficial leaders as well, brought into the role of giving guidance to the rest of the team as well. And I brought my guitar along and hidden it away, but it soon became prominent as well in leadership role for worship. And God affirmed that he had some hand on my life in that direction also. And while every evening after supper we got to spend a half an hour with some 30 orphan girls living in the adobe hut next door to the building we were building for them. And it was wonderful and fun to see them, and it was an incredible summer to be there in Haiti, to visit in their churches on the Sundays, to share testimonies through an interpreter. It was just an incredible summer, living in tents there with the tarantulas all around, keeping your tent zippered. And with that setting, I felt God simply nudging me towards his church back home, to care for his flock back home, that was the role he had for me. It would be a few years before I would publicly say that to anyone else, that I thought he may have called me towards a pastoral role, because I believe that it doesn't matter what I think. You're not a leader if you have no followers, and unless you have the affirmation of the church, you may just be deluding yourself about a particular calling you think God has given you. But when God pulls it all together, it's time to acknowledge his hand. And so that summer in Haiti was key, and heading to Bible college that first year, well, that was a total change of direction for anything I had thought my life would entail. One thing led to another. My first year at CBC was marked by one more key verse, 1 Thessalonians 5:24. Faithful is he who calls you, and he also will do it, or he also will bring it to pass. In very pragmatic terms, I determined to go through doors that God would open. And if the doors of pastoral work closed, I could always work in construction or drive a truck or do something else. God would supply. It didn't all depend on me. It still does not depend on me. And I couldn't force open any doors anyways. That's just a little bit of how God led me into pastoral work. And before Audrey shares a bit of her story from her side, I want to acknowledge this. Without Audrey by my side as my wife, through all these years of being a pastor of God's church, I would have stepped aside a long time ago. She has been God's gift to me, and now to you. So now, a bit of her story.
40 years ago, we said our vows before God to one another, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. Of course, we were young and we only thought, well, we'll get richer, we're poor now, and we only thought it would be better, and we'll always be healthy. Our 40th anniversary caused me to reflect on all the ways that God has been faithful as we have walked both the better and worse, the richer and poorer, in sickness and in health. And hopefully the death till do us part won't be for a long time yet. My journey with the Lord began at 7 years old when I made a decision that I wanted to be a Christ follower. I wanted to be Jesus' friend. As I reached elementary age, I wanted to be a missionary nurse. In high school, I went to a missions conference where I heard a missionary speak, and I really, again, thought that God's call on my life was to be in missions. And because I wanted to be a nurse also, I decided I would try candy striping at a hospital. Well, that lasted a month, and I realized I was not cut out to be a nurse. So my next step after high school, if I was going to be a missionary, was I decided I had to go to Bible college. So right after high school, I went straight to Canadian Bible College. When I came home during the first year, my friends would always talk about this new guy in church who was working college and career, and his name was Tom. And I came home for a New Year's party. It was home for Christmas vacation. And my friend introduced me to him, and she had been telling me how wonderful he is, and all my friends have been saying how good looking he was and how gifted he was. And I wasn't really impressed on my first meeting. He was complimenting my friend on the cookies that she had baked for the party. Well, that summer after my first year, just before CBC, going back, Tom was also going to CBC, and we were at the Dairy Queen with a whole bunch of people, and I happened to sit at the same table as him, and as I got to talking, I started to have a little bit of interest in him. During that second year, it was the fall, and I was struggling with submission to the Lord in an area, and I was talking with a friend, and she said to me, Audrey, if you don't submit to the Lord in this issue, you might miss something wonderful at supper time. And I thought, yeah, right. What would be so wonderful at supper time? But as I was getting ready to go, the song came into my head, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is peace. And I thought, you know, I really don't have peace. I need to submit in this area that the Lord was asking me to. So I submitted. And at supper time, Tom asked me to go to a movie. Wow, that was a big surprise. Little did I know that it wasn't a date and that he was just filling his whole car with people. That began my journey of starting to have an interest in him and falling in love. God, through those 3 years at college, showed me that he was the man that he had chosen for me. But Tom just wanted to be my friend, and I had a lot of struggles over the thing and saying, Lord, please take these feelings away because it looks like it's hopeless. And yet the Lord reaffirmed with scripture and circumstances over and over again to me that he was the one. At the end of my first year of college, I got called to the Dean of Women's office. Now that's usually not a good sign. Usually you were in trouble for something. But she had called me and she was asking me to become a resident assistant in my second year. Well, if you knew me, I was extremely shy and introverted. And I'm not sure why she even picked me out of the group of women because I certainly didn't stand out. But the Lord had seen something and wanted to prepare me. So as I was making my decision, a friend said to me, "I will not listen to you if you become an RA." Well, I felt the Lord saying, "Yes, I want you to do this." And through those 3 years, the Lord developed in me a confidence that I didn't have before. Because I had the role, I had to reach out to other people, to the women on my dorm that I was in charge of. And He gave me a love for ministering to women during that time. My last year, now I was planning to be a missionary. About a month before I graduated, I went to my world missions class. There was only 4 of us in the class, and the teacher was a missionary who was home on furlough. His name was Jim Sawatsky. And he said, "I have my lesson prepared, but I really feel like the Holy Spirit has asked me to change what I have to say." And then he began to share how sometimes people heard a missionary speak and they thought that God was calling them to be into missions, but what really God was doing was calling them to full-time ministry. When he shared that, the Holy Spirit said, "That's you, Audrey. I'm calling you to ministry, but it's not to missions." Well, then I thought, now what? Here I've spent 4 years preparing for missions. My secret heart's desire, well, not so secret, my friends knew, was I wanted to be a pastor's wife, and in particular, Tom's wife. But I thought, what am I going to do now? I've spent all these 4 years, wasn't dating Tom, now no missions. And then a friend came to me and told me about a position as assistant dean of women at a college in Canada. And she said, "Why don't you apply?" And the Lord said, "This is the direction I want you to go." Well, I didn't get the job. And I went home to Saskatoon, and that fall I became very, very discouraged, thinking, how do I know what God's will is for me? How do I know His voice? How can I understand His calling? I thought I was called to ministry, but nothing was happening, and I thought this job was where He was leading me, and didn't get that. I thought I was going to marry Tom, and he wasn't interested. So my parents sent me on a holiday to sort things out with the Lord. I went to Banff and I got a hotel room in Canmore, and it was beside a creek. So I sit by this creek with my Bible and I began to seek the Lord and I wanted to hear from Him. He began with Isaiah 6. "In the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, lofty and exalted, with the train of His robe filling the temple. Seraphim stood above Him, each having 6 wings. With 2 He covered His face, and with 2 He covered His feet, and with 2 He flew. And one called out to another and said, 'Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of His glory.' And the foundations of the thresholds trembled at the voice of Him who called out, while the temple was filling with smoke. Then I said, 'Woe is me, for I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts.' Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a burning coal in his hand, which he had taken from the altar with tongs. And he touched my mouth with it and said, 'Behold, this has touched your lips, and your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is forgiven.' Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?' Then I said, 'Here am I, send me.'" The Lord began by saying, "This is the order of your relationship. First, I had to see and get to know Him and who He was and how awesome and mighty He was and holy. And then I had to see who I was. And then I could hear His voice and I could respond by sending me. I could say, 'Send me,' wherever He wanted. But it was God, getting to know Him first, then knowing my position with Him, and then being able to respond to what He asked. As I continued seeking God by that creek, the Lord spoke again to me from Isaiah 30, 15 to 21. "Thus the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, has said, 'In repentance and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and trust is your strength. But you were not willing, and you said, No, for we will flee on horses. Therefore you shall flee. And we will ride on swift horses. Therefore those who pursue you shall be swift. 1,000 shall flee at the threat of one man. You shall flee at the threat of 5 until you are left as a flag on a mountaintop and as a signal on a hill. Therefore the Lord longs to be gracious to you, and therefore he waits on high to have compassion on you, for the Lord is a God of justice. How blessed are those who long for him. O people in Zion, inhabitant in Jerusalem, you will weep no longer. He will surely be gracious to you at the sound of your cry. When he hears it, he will answer you. Although the Lord has given you bread of privation and water of oppression, he, your teacher, will no longer hide himself, but your eyes will behold your teacher, and your ears will hear a word behind you. This is the way, walk in it, whenever you turn to the right or to the left. The Lord said to me, I long to be compassionate to you and gracious to you, and that you have to rest and trust in me. And he told me that I would have to go through those hard times of waiting, but he was going to answer. And later that day, I took a nap, which is unusual. I was in my 20s, and I dream lots, and they have no meaning. But once in a while, the Lord has given me a dream, and in the dream, the Lord showed me that I was going to teach Tom to love me. Well, I left from those few days of seeking the Lord and went home with a peace, knowing that God was in control and I could trust him. I got a job at an accounting firm as what we called a key punch operator. That's just a data entry person. And that job prepared me for later on when I needed work to put Tom through seminary. So the Lord had his hand even in that. That spring, Tom gave me a magazine, and it was an outdated magazine, but there was an ad for an assistant dean of women at a college down in Minnesota. So I applied. Didn't know if it was still available. I applied and I got the job. And 2 weeks before I moved 900 miles away, Tom began dating me and wanted to be more than just friends. Here we've been together all this time, and now I'm leaving for 900 miles. This week, I was reading in 2 Timothy 1, verse 12. For I know whom I have believed, and I am convinced that he is able to guard what I have entrusted to him until that day. That was one of the scriptures during the waiting time that God had given me, that I could trust my life, and I could trust what he said, and I could trust my relationship with Tom, and he would guard it. Looking back, I can see all the ways he guarded what we have entrusted him with. He is faithful in the many joys, the better and the worse. He's faithful in the dark times. We walked through infertility, but we're given gifts of 3 sons. He's been faithful through mental health struggles, through my cancer journey and mental breakdown, faithful in our sons' lives and their struggles. I was reminded now, as I'm a grandma and a mom to adult children, and we are nearing retirement and we don't know what the future is going to hold, but the Lord reminded me, I know whom I have believed, and I am convinced. Second time without the tears. I know whom I have believed, and I am convinced that he is able to guard what I have entrusted to him until that day.
Well, here we are together, 40 years and a week, almost. So you heard a little bit about Audrey's wish to become my wife. Now a little bit about my wish for her to become my wife. I interned for a year at University Drive Alliance as a college and career pastor. Audrey had graduated already. She graduated 2 years before me. And she's still younger than me. I was waiting for her to say that, because she always wants to say that to make sure she's younger than me. But she graduated 2 years before me, so the year she worked in Saskatoon as a key punch operator, I was interning as a college and career pastor. That was my experience, and we served together in leadership for that very large college and career age group in Saskatoon that year. It was a good year. It was a very good year. And as Audrey mentioned, somewhere along the way in that year, I found an old copy of the Alliance magazine, Alliance Witness, that was advertising for that assistant dean of women's job in St. Paul, Minnesota. An old copy, and she got that job. And as she said, 2 weeks before she was moving down to St. Paul to take that job, 900 miles away from Regina, I decided we should become more than friends. And here's how that happened. That probably in June, it still was more than 2 weeks before when you went down, but I needed still time to get to work on things. So there was Friday night events for college and career, social activities and devotional and such, and a friend and I were sitting at the back of one of the basement gathering rooms in the church, and we were watching the girls walk by, and Audrey walked by, and my friend said to me, "Audrey would make some pastor an excellent wife." And I agreed with him wholeheartedly, unreservedly. I absolutely knew that. Now, I'd finished 3 years of Bible college. I had acknowledged that I wanted to be a pastor. It is difficult to be a pastor as a single man. It still is a challenge. I knew that I needed a wife. I wanted a wife. That night, right around midnight, as I was pondering my dilemma of wanting to be a pastor, wanting to be married, at midnight, I sat bolt upright in bed and said, thinking of Audrey, "I'm going to marry that girl." I said it right out loud. Then I lay down, I went to sleep. I don't know why I thought she would marry me.
I had let him know lots of times.
Oh, no. You always told me we could only be friends. You always you said, "Okay, we can only be friends," and I believed you because I wanted to be your friend. I didn't, men aren't very good at reading the subtle signs that women give, so. But somewhere along the way, I must have picked it up that I thought she might be open to the idea of going out together. So, at that point, I had to try to figure out how to move from being just friends to being more than just friends. And somehow we negotiated that journey, and a few weeks before she was scheduled to move down to St. Paul, Minnesota, and I was heading to Regina to conclude my Bible college degree. I was heading to a 5-week course in summer Greek starting in August. We were going together, and it was good. It was very good. Except that we were 900 miles apart the entire time we were together. A few trips from Regina down to St. Paul, and a few times Audrey was able to make it up, and she forbid me to talk about marriage kinds of issues. And I like to just talk about things, and she said she forbid me for talking about things, and I came to the point on a visit down to St. Paul where I had asked her to sort of marry me so that we could just talk about things.
He didn't ask me to marry him yet.
Okay. So, okay, here's what I really said. A little over 40 years ago, I said, "So, do you still want to marry me?"
I still want to be married to you.
Well, we men aren't always the cleverest when it comes to these proposal ideas, but I accepted her response as a yes, and that was in February, and in March we made it official and public because I gave her a ring when she came up to Regina for a visit, and got her parents' permission and all of that. And we were married that July 1980, and that's the story of how we got together. The story of what has gone on since then. Audrey's alluded to a few of the kinds of scenarios that she's sketched from our lives since then, but for today, we're just celebrating 40 wonderful years of marriage and just sharing a bit of our story with you and God's hand on our lives. God bless you.